with 3.6 being about a little over a day away, also meaning the first half character Evernight being a little over a day away. I'm sure a lot of people are on fence if they want to pull for her or not, and today this video will be for that exactly. Going over briefly what Evernight does, what makes her really strong, very important considerations that a lot of people will have misunderstandings on, reasons why you should or should not summon, and at the very end I will be talking about some brief vertical investment for people who are already set on summoning but they don't know if they want to get her Lycone, if they don't know if they want to go for E1 or both or whatever. I will be going over that as well. So Evernight is the brand new Remembrance Ice DPS that is going to be functioning like an HP drain character that also just kind of works similarly to Castress. The whole idea of summoning your Memo Sprite, recycling it over and over again because you get the big attack that ends up detonating the Memo Sprite. Hers is a lot more simple because you can summon it by using your skill, you can summon it by using ultimate, while Castress is only VIA ult. Evernight's ultimate is also very important because it gives you Darkest Riddle State, where you make enemies take more damage, you increase damage dealt by Evernight herself and also Eevee, which is the name of her Memo Sprite. And the way you detonate it, rather than just draining all its HP, you get 16 stacks called Memoria stacks. Once you have 16, you get another turn to act, and you do a big AoE attack which does a lot of damage and detonates your Memo Sprite. So you have to use your ultimate or skill to resummon it. She also doesn't consume skill points, so that lets someone like Hyacinth on the team freely use all the skill points needed, or whatever sustain you're using that might want to use skill a lot more than others. Memoria isn't just capped at using 16 points, you can get a bunch more, like 50 plus, and have all of that consumed within that attack, and you get a big increase of damage. The more Memoria stacks you have and consume, the more damage that attack is going to do, which quite literally gets her to do more damage than a lot of very popular DPSs right now. That is how strong it can be when you consume a bunch of Memoria stacks. The way you get those Memoria stacks is by consuming her HP, having herself get hit, having your Memo Sprite get hit or consume HP, or really just anything like that. It's a little different than Castress because Castress is really just losing or gaining HP with anyone on the team. For this, it's Evernight and her Memo Sprite herself only. You can gain it by having the Memo Sprite act, you can gain it by using her skill in general because you get some set amount of points from that. So pretty much the playstyle is just the recycling your Memo Sprite and doing big damage by detonating your Memo Sprite. That's not all she has though. She actually has some supportive capabilities for Remembrance / Memo Sprite characters in the team. Her Darkest Riddle State, I did mention, increases damage received by enemies by 30%, so that's good for anyone on the team. Evernight also does buff the crit damage of allied Memo Sprites on the team based off her own. So characters on the team like Mem from RMC or Little Ika from Hyacinth, if they ever crit, they're going to be doing more damage since their crit damage is being buffed from Evernight. She's also further able to amplify that crit damage buff thanks to her A2, which will additionally increase all Memo Sprites crit damage by 5% / 15% / 50% / 65% based off the number of Remembrance characters on the team, which obviously does include hers. The more Remembrance characters on the team, the bigger the crit damage buff for your Memo Sprites. Next to her A6, it's also very easy to balance her crit since she does give herself 35% crit rate for both her and her Memo Sprite, meaning you have a 40% base crit rate because you have 5% base, plus the trace, that is 40%. So you combine all this with having the ability to support, having the ability to do really good damage, especially as a main DPS, and also being relatively on the easier side to build thanks to how her crit does work. She is just incredibly strong. The only real downside to her, so this brings us to the next point of the video, is that as being a Remembrance and also HP scaler in this game, it is a bit limited on what you can do. Obviously, the more you take away from her actual best team, the higher her ceiling does get. Like, you can run her sustainless because you're not doing team's HP as opposed to Castress, so you really can't do sustainless with her. But there's that issue, and also the fact that Remembrance SIGs kind of always was a problem. Lycones on that path are still a bit rough. And then the last thing would be that her multipliers aren't the highest. So there definitely was like room for improvement, but obviously if she had higher multipliers, she'd probably be like far and none the best unit in the game by far. But yeah, I guess you can also consider that as a downside. These are all looked at differently because you could have the unit so it doesn't affect you. The multiplier issue can be very much solved by running a sustainless setup with Ruan Mei and also Ice Orb, which is part of her best build. There's a lot of ways to counteract this, and it obviously changes from player to player. But it is a general downside to see that her mainly Lycone options and team flexibility can be limited depending on how good the player is. A really good player will not have a problem with this, as again, as I mentioned, she has a higher ceiling as opposed to a lot of other characters in the game where you can actually sub out a lot of stuff. But someone on the more casual side, which is most of the player base, is going to be a bit rough. But this also does directly tie into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the misunderstanding that she is pretty much a glorified castress Eidolon and also needs Hyacine Sig. Both of these are just objectively incorrect. She's not a glorified castress Eidolon. I've already made a video talking about this on why that's wrong. She works fantastic without castress entirely. As a main DPS, I argue, and I'm not going to argue, I'm just going to say she's straight up better. Of course, as a dual DPS, she functions best on that team. Especially with the buffs and running with castress herself, the team damage overall goes up a lot. So while yes, it is extremely strong, I do not think in any way, shape, or form she is a glorified castress Eidolon, as Evernight herself is insanely broken. Practically one of the best DPSs in my opinion. As I already mentioned, she functions insanely well as a main DPS, and that's how I mainly look at her, as her own main DPS. It's the whole issue of Anaxa as a glorified Eidolon for the Herda again, and people realize Anaxa is arguably better in a lot of different scenarios. It's the same thing like that. Evernight is just gonna be in that same boat again. She functions great with castress, yes, but she still functions absolutely fantastic without castress. She does not need castress whatsoever. She doesn't need to be on a team with castress at all. Next thing is Hyacine and Hyacine Sig. While yes, of course, Hyacine is going to be the best for these characters and is just overall the best sustained now, but very much has a gap when it comes to these HP scalers. And the same does stand for Evernight. She is not glued to how castress is glued to that character and signature especially. Hyacine plus her signature is the reason you can get multiple dragons within the first or just whatever cycle you're on. You can get it so quickly. Well, yes, that does also stack up Memoria stacks for Evernight. She does not nearly need Hyacine as much as someone like castress does. As I mentioned, Evernight has a lot of a higher ceiling when it comes to using her, meaning running Sustainless, which will always have a higher ceiling because you always have to worry about being killed in battle. Because with someone like Hyacine, it's not ever going to be a problem. HP drain from Hyacine's signature is obviously great for Memoria stack building, but you very much function well without it. You can get it by having more turns. You're not draining the team's HP, so you can always have a extra support in there for more damage. And Hyacine's signature is not going to be the reason you get like 50 million more explosions on a Memo Sprite. She's still able to get a bunch without it, and is able to do completely fine without that signature. So that's another big misunderstanding when it comes to her. She's not nearly as tied to Hyacine and her signature as opposed to castress. While yes, it's definitely going to be the best performance if you do have it, it's, again, not nearly as much of a drop as opposed to having it with someone like castress and not. Because a lot of people look at it as the same thing. It's going to be as big as not running castress nowadays with Hyacine and her signature. It is not nearly that big. So those are two big misunderstandings that I do want to clarify. She's not a glorified castress Eidolon. She functions very, very well by herself, arguably better. And she's nowhere near as Hyacine and signature reliant. And now, reasons why you should or should not summon. It's very simple when it comes to DPS should you summons, because you mainly just want to look at, are you needed for this element specifically, and also in general, are you in need of another DPS. Evernight is a main DPS for ice, so if you have no ice coverage, Evernight can be a great consideration, especially if you have her teammates free. If you're able to give her Tribby, if you're able to give her RMC is free. Tribby is very much in demand, so that could be a big shift. Unfortunately, for quite literally every single HP scaler, they have the issue of wanting Tribby. So it's something you want to consider, and if you are still running a Evernight slash castress dual DPS team, if you want her for that, again, I already mentioned she's great and better on her own, but she's still really broken on that team. So if you want her for that reason as well, that's another great consideration to put her on. So mainly, if you're in need of another DPS, you have her teammates, like if you have RMC and should be available. If you have Hyacine and her signature, great. If you don't, it's not needed, as I mentioned. Then she can be a very, very, very broken option for a DPS that's going to cover you in AoE situations. At E0 and E0S1, her single target damage is still nice, but it's not like the greatest unless you play Sustainless or you get a vertical investment into E1 and such, which again, I will cover in a little bit. So she is going to be fantastic at all times for AoE situations. If you're wanting her for a castress dual DPS team, as I mentioned, she works great there. So in either or cases, needing a DPS that's going to cover you in AoE, or you want her to put it on the castress team to make that team stronger, both reasons are really good and will definitely be an upgrade in both fronts. And for reasons why you shouldn't summon, it would be the direct opposite. If you're not in need of another DPS, then why would you really summon? Or if you're in need of a DPS but you need more lower type coverage, like 3 enemies or less, mainly 1 enemy or 2 enemies, so like a single target oriented style of DPS, then of course you're better off investing into someone else. Since Evernight is made with AoE in mind, she isn't horrible when it comes to single target. But of course, she wasn't made with it completely in mind, otherwise multipliers would be higher and would focus on one target rather, or just blast in general. But if you're in need of a DPS, but you need it mainly for covering single target stuff, or maybe even like some single target APOC stuff, then of course there are better options. And maybe you don't use a Cassius dual DPS team, or you just don't have Cassius, or you don't want to use her, then you not have a reason to upgrade that team either. Or maybe you want her, but you don't have like any of her teammates. Like let's say RMC is in complete use right now. You can't do anything, say but Chibi, or you just don't have Chibi. There's one thing of not having Hyacinth and not having her signature, but then there's the other thing of not having RMC and also Chibi available. If you just don't have her team available, then it's going to be something you can also pass up on. Since unfortunately she can't use stuff like Ting Yun, she can't use stuff like Robin who have big attack buffs since she is HP scaling. So in those cases, I would also advise you to skip and focus on someone else instead that can fit your account needs better. And now the very last part of this video, the vertical investment portion. So Evernight's Light Cone increases max HP, gives the ability to make the entire team's Memo Sprites ignore 20% of target's defense, increasing damage dealt by the wearer and Memo Sprite, and also recovering 8 energy when the wearer's Memo Sprite disappears. Her E1 will make her do more damage based off the amount of enemies on the field, and also applies to ally Memo Sprites as well. So when Evernight is on the field, and if there's 4 or more /3/2/1 enemy targets on the field, ally Memo Sprites deal 120/125/130/150% of their original damage respectively. And our E2, which increases both Evernight and her Memo Sprites crit damage, and every time Evernight gains Memoria, it will increase the Memoria stacks gained by 2. And when using Ultimate, you get 2 additional Darkest Riddle state charges. All these options are insanely good. E1 versus S1 is going to be a big consideration, and both actually do have their perks. Evernight's Light Cone is very good for herself and also good for your team, as it gives your team Memo Sprites more abilities to ignore defense to do more damage, giving her more max HP, which is going to increase her overall damage as well, and also increasing her damage while also providing 8 energy. Evernight has a massive 240 max energy requirement for her ultimate, so that is going to help significantly with getting your ultimate back, especially since you recycle her Memo Sprite a lot. It's just really strong. Her E1 really fixes her only problem with the idea of being a full AoE character, as now the less enemies on the field, the more the original damage increases. And her E2 is one of the most broken DPS Eidolons in the game. It amplifies the living hell out of the Memoria stacks you gain, and having 2 extra Darkest Riddle state charges is just absolutely absurd, and also again free crit damage. S1 would mainly be the consideration over everything else if you really just have no other option to give to her. Like if you're in the same situation as Cassius was, where the next best option would be giving the max HP Light Cone. Or not max HP Light Cone, but like one that gives max HP or the highest base HP Light Cone. In that case, you're probably a lot better off getting that just so you can have a good Light Cone on her. E1 would be a consideration if you are still mainly interested in running her as a sub DPS on Cassius's team, since this is going to significantly impact Cassius's damage when it comes to single target as well, and also Evernight's own damage when it comes to single target as well, as it just further amplifies her sub DPS capabilities and also makes someone like Hyacinth on the team do even more damage as well. So as a main DPS with not many other Light Cone options, or in general just not many Light Cone options, S1 would be a fantastic pickup. E1 is also fantastic, mainly as a sub DPS, which would have more priority over S1. And if you are fully running her as a main DPS, then picking it up is great, especially since it steps you up to her absolutely insanely busted E2. You just significantly increase the damage output she gets because you're having more Darkest Riddle state charges. You practically can always have it up. You're able to practically always get your Memo Sprite detonations by using skill, and it becomes a free permanent 40% crit damage for both you and your Memo Sprite. So, quite literally, every single vertical investment option she has is just insanely strong. So, really, any option you pick is not going to be a bad option. Her S1 is going to be great for herself and your team. Her E1 is great for herself and her team. And her E2 is just absolutely broken for herself and is going to make her far and none one of the best DPSs in the game. So, quite literally, I don't even gonna argue any of these options. Any option you want to do is going to be good. It changes, like again, if you want to run her as a main DPS but you have no Light Cone options, then Light Cone is going to be better overall. If you're running her as a sub DPS but you also maybe have like a max HP or like a Battle Pass Light Cone, then you still can very much choose to go for E1 instead and increase everyone's damage even more, including herself. And it also steps you up to E2, which I mentioned is insanely broken. Realistically, the best actual situation is E2 S0. Like, if you were able to choose between getting E0 S1, E1 S0, or E2 S0 for some ungodly reason, or maybe even like E1 S1, E2 S0 is actually just the best pick, just because that's how absolutely broken that E2 is. So really, any vertical investment option in Evernight is just a good idea because they're all just insanely powerful. And that does bring this video to a close, taking over what Evernight does. a bit of her weaknesses and a bit of misunderstandings when it comes to how she does function, reasons why you should summon, reasons why you shouldn't summon, and then also vertical investment when you are considering it. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, once again, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the button for future videos like this along with all the tips and style content, and I'll see you later. Peace out.